Hey everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about why we have no temple today. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. Elohim's people, known as Yisrael, have been without a temple for almost 2,000 years. And although that sounds like a terribly sad thing, we have to remember that Elohim has a reason for everything he does or those things that he allows to come to pass. In the beginning, there were no Levites and there was no Levitical priesthood. If you remember, the Levites were not set apart in service to Elohim until after the incident with the golden calf. We can read in the book of Genesis about Abel's sacrifice and about Noah making a sacrifice or a burnt offering after they left the ark, or Abraham sacrificing a ram after he passed the test with his son Isaac. And there's plenty of examples where we can read about people making sacrifices in Genesis. But these were men of Elohim doing these sacrifices. There was no Levitical priesthood at that time, nor would there be any for many, many years. There was also no temple or tabernacle or even any mention of one. Not yet. Until we get to Exodus 25, verses 8 to 9. And they shall make me a set-apart place, and I shall dwell in their midst. According to all that I show you, the pattern of the dwelling place and the pattern of all its furnishings make it exactly so. Set-apart place in verse 8 comes from the Hebrew word mikdash, which means a sanctuary, a consecrated place, a set-apart place. Dwelling place in verse 9 comes from the Hebrew mishkan, which means residence, dwelling place, tabernacle, or temple. Exodus 25:9 was the first time that the word mishkan was used in the Tanakh. So before this point in time, there was no tabernacle or temple mentioned. Ancient writings tell us that the Torah was given to the Israelites in the Sinai Desert roughly 1313 BCE, give or take a little, which is right around roughly 2,448 years after creation. So mankind was around for over 2,000 years before a temple or mishkan was commanded to be built by Elohim. They were around for a little over 2,000 years, and the temple was destroyed almost 2,000 years ago. So hasn't always been a temple, not for the greatest portion of our time on earth. Let me read a couple passages from Torah, starting with Deuteronomy 16:16. 3 times a year, all your males appear before Yehovah your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, at the festival of weeks, and at the festival of booths. And also this in Deuteronomy 12:5-6. Seek the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. And there you shall take your burnt offerings, and your tithes, and the contributions of your hand, and your vowed offerings, and your voluntary offerings, and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock. So let me ask this. In order to keep the feast, like we just heard, how many of you would be financially able to travel to Jerusalem from wherever you may live, anywhere in the dispersion, 3 times a year? 3 times a year. I know we couldn't afford to do so, not even once. And if we could afford to go to Jerusalem during the feast, how could we keep them exactly as commanded at this point in time without a temple? How? And because we are still in the dispersion, we know that Elohim hasn't gathered his people yet. And he told us that we'd be scattered, as we can read, for example, in Deuteronomy 4:27. And Yehovah shall scatter you among the people, or the nations, and you shall be left few in number among the Gentiles where Yehovah drives you. Elohim told Abraham that his descendants would be scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, and we are. Elohim knew that if his temple remained in Jerusalem, that his people in the dispersion wouldn't be able to make it there 3 times per year. And say there were still a remnant of his people living in Jerusalem and there was still a temple there. How would it fare for the rest of us if they could present themselves before Elohim and we could not? So Elohim allowed the temple to be leveled, and thereby the playing field, so to speak, was leveled as well for his people. which puts us all in the same position wherever we live, scattered around the earth. But we have the unfailing word of our Elohim that he will gather his people at the end of days. Starting with Ezekiel 11:17. Therefore say, Thus said the Master Yahweh, and I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Israel. Isaiah 11:11-12. And it shall be in that day that Yahweh sets his hand again a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left, from Ashur and from Mitzrayim and from Pathros and from Cush, from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. And he shall raise a banner for the nations and gather the outcasts of Israel and assemble the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. Zechariah 10:9. Though I sow them among people, they shall remember me in places far away, and they shall live together with their children, and they shall return. Elohim gathered his people and delivered them from bondage in Egypt. That was the first time. And he tells us the following that we just read is recorded in Isaiah 11:11. And it shall be in that day that Yahuwah sets his hand again a second time to recover the remnant of his people who are left. When Elohim brought them out of Egypt, they were the known children of Yisrael. There's no question that they were all the descendants of Yaakov, right? There were, I'm sure some foreigners in there, and there was probably some Egyptians that came with, and kind of a mixed multitude, but they were mainly the children of Israel that came out, the known children of Israel. He showed them great signs, and he showed them great wonders, and they heard his voice. And yet, after all that, they rebelled, they fell into idolatry, and they were scattered or dispersed into the nations, just like Elohim told them they would be if they did what they did. None of us today in the dispersion have seen great signs and wonders. None of us have heard Elohim's voice emanating from a cloud or a great fire on a mountain. But yet we take hold of his covenant, and we are seeking to be his people as we come out of religion and we leave idolatry. We live by his word and seek to become his people. Hosea 1:10. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which is not measured nor counted. And it shall be in the place where it was said to them, You are not my people. They shall be called, You are the sons of the living El. We were once not his people, but we are becoming his people. More and more of us. Hallelujah. And so we wait to be gathered by him. And what do we have to do to be gathered by our Elohim? I read the following passage quite a few times in my videos, but listen to what Elohim says here, as this tells us the whole story. Deuteronomy 30:1-4. And it shall be, when all these words come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles where Yahuwah your Elohim drives you, and you shall turn back to Yahuwah your Elohim, and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your being, you and your children. Then Yahuwah your Elohim shall turn back your captivity, and he shall have compassion on you, and he shall turn back and gather you from all the people where Yahuwah your Elohim has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the furthest parts under the heavens, from there Yahuwah your Elohim does gather you, and from there he does take you. So we will be gathered again and brought into the land by Elohim. Remember, we're told in the Tanakh that the sacrifices are going to start up again someday? Well, this is after we're gathered to one place where he has placed his name, and sacrifices will be done once again to atone for our sin and the unknown sin, or the sin that we have done by mistake. But we were told we'd be a long time without sacrifices or a king. In Hosea 3:4-5. For many days the children of Israel are to remain without sovereign and without prince, without slaughtering and without pillar, and without shoulder garment or house idols. Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek Yahuwah their Elohim, and David their sovereign, and fear Yahuwah and his goodness in the latter days. But how do we get forgiveness today? Psalm 32:5. I acknowledge my sin to you, and my crookedness I did not hide. I have said, I confess my transgressions to Yahuwah, and you forgave the crookedness of my sin. Ezekiel 18:21. But the wrong, if he turns from all his sin which he has done, and he shall guard all my laws, and shall do right ruling and righteousness, he shall certainly live, he shall not die. 2 Chronicles 7:14. and my people, upon whom my name is called, if they humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, then I shall hear from the heavens and forgive their sin. Elohim clearly states that if the wrong repents and turns back and walks according to the laws of life, that he shall certainly live, he shall not die, and that none of his sins which he has committed shall be remembered against him. We don't need a temple or sacrifices for that. We just need to realize that we were living a life of sin and repent of that by returning to and living our lives according to the Torah. We see that unintentional sin or sinning by mistake was what the animal sacrifices were for. Two examples here. The first one in Leviticus 5:15. When a being commits a trespass and has sinned by mistake against the set-apart matters of Yehovah, then he shall bring to Yehovah as his guilt offering a ram, a perfect one, from the flock. In Numbers 15:28, and the priest shall make atonement for the being who strays by mistake when he sins by mistake before Yehovah, to make atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. Now, let me read a few examples from the Tanakh about the sacrifices starting again when Elohim raises us and puts us all together. Starting with Ezekiel 44:15. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, who guarded the duty of my set-apart place, when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall draw near to me to serve me, and shall stand before me to bring to me the fat and the blood, declares the Master Yehovah. Isaiah 56:7. Them I shall bring to my set-apart mountain, and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their slaughterings are accepted on my altar, for my house is called a house of prayer for all the people. And in Jeremiah 33:18, and for the priests, the Levites, there is not to cease a man to offer burnt offerings before me, to kindle grain offerings, and to slaughter continually. At the end of days, Elohim will raise up his people Yisrael, those who have repented and have turned back to Torah, and those who are not in idolatry. Today, we're not only confessing our transgressions of his Torah, but we're also doing what we can read about others doing so long ago in Nehemiah 9:2. And the descendants of Yisrael separated themselves from all foreigners and stood and confessed their sin and the crookedness of their fathers. We had to realize that we were raised up in falsehood and idolatry, and that we had to come out of all of our inherited and hand-me-down lies. A lot of them. We had to return to Elohim's ancient path that he set down for us so long ago, and we know that Elohim will forgive those of us that are doing so. And we know that at the time that Elohim chooses, we will be gathered and put back on the land, and then we will have a temple to once again present ourselves before Elohim and keep everything he commanded exactly as he commanded it. I hope this video blessed you. A shout out to all of those who are scattered worldwide in the dispersion. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.